What is up, my dear speakies? I hope you're doing amazing and welcome to this video. I look very young right now because I'm going to be doing my Mundo cosplay today, and so for that I didn't need a beard, and that's why I look a little bit homeless at the moment. But besides the point, we're going to be talking about top lane tier list today. I'm going to be covering every single top lane champion together with Chippies. We're going to divide it into two sections. We're going to have a lower MMR tier list all the way from bronze up until emerald, and then we're going to have a higher elo tier list from diamond up until challenger, because ultimately the champion variety will be different. For example, lower MMR, I value a lot of set check potential, scaling, split push, and sustain. And in higher elo, blind pick ability and how good your champion can function into every draft becomes a lot more important of a metric. Throughout this video, there will be timestamps so you can figure out, whatever champion you want to look into. And hopefully by the end of this video, you'll be able to also know what champion you want to main, because every champion we talk about the benefits, we talk about the downsides, and then there's of course going to be a balance. So for whatever, path thing you're taking in your top lane journey right now, this should help you in finding your top lane champion to main alongside it. So without any further ado, let's get into it. Alrighty guys, so we're going to chronologically talk about every single top laner there. I pushed that word, but that's all fine. And we're going to give kind of like our thoughts on every top laner. The way we're going to approach it is we're going to do the lower elo tier list first. We're going to go from pretty much bronze to emerald elo. Emerald included is this first tier list, and then we'll reorder the tier list to higher elo, so diamond and above. What are some qualities that you're kind of looking for, Chippies, when we're talking about lower elo champions?
So for lower elo, it's mainly going to be champions that are pretty easy to play, so ease of execution, but also pretty high carry potential. So a champion that's quite easy to play like Maokai, I wouldn't put him very high at all because the carry potential is just so terrible. So those are going to be the two, I'd say, the main criteria.
Yep, absolutely. I think carrying is like the broad perspective. Sometimes I say like a few S's. So I look for something, for example, like sustain, but that is increase the ease of execution, split push potential, I guess sideline potential, that's the same thing. And then stat checking. I think stat checking is also such a beautiful thing towards low MMR champions. So I'm going to let you do the first one. What are your thoughts on Aatrox right now?
Aatrox, I think he's got a good buff on the way, but at the moment, I'd put him pretty much dead center of B tier. Like probably the most middle of the pack top lane champ you can pick.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. So the problem that I have with Aatrox as a design is that he's very good for controlled gameplay. He is very good in laning phase. He can lane into bruisers, range champions, tanks as well. However, the problem that you have as Aatrox is that you are kind of limited in terms of carry potential to team fighting. You can only really execute your kit in team fights. You can't really split push that well or have side lane pressure, and so it limits the amount of weak conditions that you have as a top laner, but you still have good laning phase, so I think B tier is perfect to put him in. I'm gonna create a new tier here at the bottom. How to do that?
Give us an F tier.
I'm gonna say I wouldn't recommend, at a row below, and it's gonna be a wouldn't recommend. And for me, honestly, Akali goes to either wouldn't recommend or D tier, and as a top laner. And the main reason as to why I'm gonna put it in wouldn't recommend for now, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts after, is that Akali is pretty limited in when you should pick her in top lane in general. You should only pick this champion as like a counter to melee bruisers. For example, against champions like Jack, she tends to do pretty well. But the problem you'll find as Akali is that if you make one mistake, you're pretty much going to be out of the game. You can't really progress the game through split pushing. It's pretty hard to keep high resources onto her. You have no sustain. Your early game laning phase is very weak as well. So yeah, for me, this champion goes into pretty much the not recommended tier.
Yeah, definitely. The main point you touched on, the only using her as a counter pick to champs like Jax or Olaf, I feel like she's in that category, but also really hard to play. So even if you do get their master and you do win lane, executing her on team fights, even from ahead, is really hard as well. So it's just not worth the time commitment. Just have a really niche counter pick when, especially below Emerald, you can pretty much win lane on anything if you play well. You don't need to rely on these cheap counter pick type champions.
Yeah, absolutely agree. And also, I think one thing is important to discuss, right? We are going to approach every champion objectively without any bias. If you're an Akali player and you enjoy playing Akali and you like playing with Akali, by all means do it. But objectively, she would not be recommended, right? I think that's important to always give that a little bit of a context there too.
For sure.
Akshan, what do you think of Akshan?
Akshan probably wouldn't recommend as well. I think similar to Akali, just really niche counter pick. I think this champ's pretty busted mid lane, but top it's just pretty dog shit unless really good matchup, and you need to be really good at it as well. So pretty similar to Akali.
Well, you shared exactly the thoughts I have there too. Then we're going to a staple here. Now, yeah, this is an interesting one. So for me, I would want to put a little bit higher end. However, the ease of execution is pretty limited on Ambessa. So I'll put it like this. Ambessa is one of the best blind pick top laners that are around there right now, even after multiple nerfs that she has gotten. and her kit is very strong because just from her kit alone she gets percentage health damage and armor penetration. However, Ambessa is a very mechanically intensive champion, and before all the nerfs that she's gotten, she was actually S tier into every single elo, and now we have seen that, you know, Ambessa has kind of tanked a little bit in terms of win rate, also towards the lower MMRs, because it is harder to efficiently execute this champion. So I think B tier is a pretty safe spot to put her in.
Yeah, it's hard to put her low because in our high elo tier list, she's probably going to be straight to S tier because the champ's just so broken. But I can see, especially that type of champion, similar to Aatrox and Renekton in a way where that 1 to 2 item spike, you want to get a lot of work done. You don't really win the game through split pushing, which is what we're looking for in our below Emerald champions, right? Like being able to win through side and scale really well with those resources. She doesn't really fit that as well. So I'm happy with B tier as long as it's on the top of B tier, I'd say.
Yeah, it's on the top of B tier for sure. Well, let's get the order of B tier there rolling too. Yeah, favorite top lane champion there, Aurora.
Oh, love it.
What do you think of Aurora?
I'd say wouldn't recommend as well. I think there's probably less than 10, 20 people in top lane that can play this champion, I think, like extremely well. I think to get the most out of it and to really crush your lane to the point where they can't play the game just takes way too much. And even if you do play well, it's, again, weak in side lane, doesn't win through side. So definitely wouldn't recommend for any below Emerald player.
Yeah, I think it's very spot on. And so I will say this, I think Aurora is arguably the most impressive top lane champion to play against, but it's very intricate to make the most use out of her kit. And the thing that you always have to recognize with the ranged top laners is that I would say ease of execution is the one I'm going to use the most here. It's very tough because you're laning without sustain. You don't have any fallback practice in the game, really. It's not like you're going to outscale on side lane or become stronger. And so if you make one mistake or one misstep or, you know, do a blunder where you get ganked, it's going to be very tricky to get back up into the game. So if you're playing a very controlled game and you know how to make most use out of your matchups, Aurora is, in my opinion, the hardest top laner to lane against in isolated 1v1. However, it's very hard to make that work consistently, and so I also would put her in the wouldn't recommend. Camille, that's your champion.
Okay, I'd actually put her in A tier. I think I'm starting to change my mind. I feel like to get good mastery on her would take between 100, 150 games to be able to play her quite well, and she's just really good at winning through side and just one of the best scaling tops in the game. I think everything Camille's kit has is what you want for a low elo champ. The issue is the ease of execution, but I feel like you don't need to execute it perfectly in the lower brackets. As long as you play, you farm well, you play side lane well, and you work on a couple of fundamentals on her, I feel like you can definitely make this champ work even for a below Emerald player. I'd stay away from her for, Iron Bronze, but for our Plat Gold students, I think it'd actually work quite well.
Yeah, and this is a mentality that I've had as well with Camille. So in the past, I used to put her pretty high on lower MMR tier list as well. And one of the tricky things about Camille is ultimately her spacing, right? You gotta get pretty good at spacing. Playing around your cooldowns is a really big thing on Camille as well. But like Chippy said, towards the lower MMRs, the game states also tends to go longer, right? Games last longer, allowing you to get to those core item spikes. And Camille is one of the most impressive champions on 3, 4, and even the 5th item too. And yeah, you have a lot of switch potential. I think you have very clear reference points in the game, right? Level 1 to level 5, you're pretty strong. After 6, you're farming to Trinity Force, but once you get Trinity Force and any additional item after that, you're going to be simply a monster in the game. So I think it's a perfect champion to put in A tier and one of the best solo carry top lane champions that we have in the game.
100%. Cassiopeia, where would you put her?
Oh, so I would put Cassiopeia in wouldn't recommend, like logically, unless you are mostly a Cassiopeia one-trick. If you are a one-trick, I'll put her kind of in C tier with that mentality. And that is because Cassiopeia is one of the few niche top lane picks that I'm a big fan of. But again, you need champion mastery on this champion. That is one of the biggest things. And that is because Cassiopeia can really lane against nearly every single top laner. It's one of the best pocket picks to have and like oppressive top lane champions to deal with. In Korea, there are quite a lot of Cassio top players, and they're very impressive to lane against. I don't see them too much in any other regions, but when you face a Cassio top one trick, the problem that you find is that they know their matchup so well, and if you haven't played against it enough yourself, you're not going to know her all-in windows or her trade patterns too well, and it's just so impressive to lane against. So C tier is one of the few range tops that I actually like a lot.
Interesting. I'd almost put her in wouldn't recommend, but I could see for a full one trick or someone that used to play mid, it could definitely work. But again, I'd stay away from her for probably silver and below. Maybe just gold and platinum.
D tier then.
Yeah, D would be fine.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, this is going to be my first S tier pick.
Okay.
I think Cho'Gath goes straight to S tier. His Halo Blade setup has gotten nerfed a little bit. I think Symbiotic Souls got nerfed and some other tools got nerfed too. I still think you can play the setup with Halo Blades and go for the movement speed oriented build. However, they have shifted damage from his Q and put more damage into his E. Meaning that, you know, he's refraining from being played in other roles like bot lane and mid lane with Halo Blades. And now he's better kind of as like this pseudo tank where you just go grasp and you go, I think you can even go Emax probably now. I'm going to give it a spin actually just today to give this champion a bit more tries, but I think he's better now as a full tank with more points in E because E has been buffed I think twice now. So yeah, and I mean he's very good in terms of stat check, right? You have insane amount of sustain which a lot of people struggle laning against. You can split push, you can team fight, especially when you run Demolish, because you actually have quite some dirt damage. And you can kill people in side lane, you're very useful around neutrals. I think this is one of the few top laners that can kind of do every single role in the game right now. So that's why I like him a lot.
I'm happy with S tier. The reason I'd want to put him in A is just because after all the nerfs, especially the Q damage nerf, like you said, you're shifting more to tank, but also he's got a lot of hard matchups. And below Emerald, you're going to verse a lot of Darius players and set players and stuff like that, where the matchup's playable if you play extremely well, but it's just one mistake dead. So I feel like for below Emerald players, maybe A tier would be fair, just because the matchup spread can be quite tricky. Even versing a Gwen or an Irelia, if you make mistakes, it could be quite brutal.
I agree with that lens through the general champions that we're going to see more too. So yeah, no, I agree with the A tier, because you're going to be more tanky. If you were able to still go to the AP variation, depending on the matchup, I would say S tier for sure, but yes, I agree with your A tier pick here.
Definitely, yeah. With 4 points Q one-shotting the wave, you had a lot more leeway, but now you need 5 points Q. It's just kind of, there's a lot more window for them to run you down.
Yeah, absolutely agree.
Darius, I'd put him in S or A tier. I'll let you be the tiebreaker, because I just think this champion is so good in pretty much every elo bracket. I feel like he's a pretty good blind pick. Once you get more confident in the range matchups, he can win through side, you team fight really well, and he's just one of the best scaling tops in the game as well. And the way you team fight is very straightforward. It's very simple. You can focus a 0-10 Nautilus. It doesn't matter. You just need to kill one idiot that's out of position, and you're broken. And that's bound to happen in any elo bracket, but especially below Emerald. There's going to be one moron that dives in. You reset, you're unbeatable. So definitely an S tier pick for me. Yeah,
I put him in S tier for me as well. And one of the things you went over quickly, but I think it's very important to mention again, is that Darius is actually one of the best scaling tops in the game. Your ultimate level 16 is so ridiculously hard to play against in any 5v5 setup. And that's the thing I had to learn the hard way too. I didn't really perceive Darius as one of the best scalers until, you know, you played against a few times and you get wiped in a late game team fight by Darius. I think what I really value about Darius too is that you learn a lot of concepts as a top laner well. You learn how to play aggressive in the early game, you learn how to punish last hits, you learn how to play with priority, you learn about, you know, when should you be taking a team fight, when should you be avoiding it. I think Darius is just all around a great top laner, and S tier for sure, you can play against a lot. Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, one of my favorite champions right now, honestly, after Riven. See, the problem with Dr. Mundo as a champion is that he is, I would say, one of the best counter picks in the game when there's low percentage health damage in the draft. However, with games tending to last longer and people not knowing too well on how to like execute most of their matchups, I'm going to put him in a solid A tier. Now, the thing with Mundo is that he's very different to nearly every top laner in the game, where when you play Mundo, you're not playing Mundo to win lane, you're playing to not lose lane, and then once you get to your Warmocks, you can start taking over the game. In high elo, I would pretty much never blind pick Mundo, unless you already see, let's say, 4 champions where he would be good against, and that is because percentage health damage, or gap close, and anti-heal options are really tricky for Mundo to deal with. But when you pick him into an ideal comp, and a good example of this would be, say, like a Hecarim jungle, only flat damage, and then like a Vex mid, Pike support, Caitlyn AD carry, none of them have any percentage health damage or anything like this. And so Mundo, which is stacking a lot of health and then resistances, will be unbeatable at a certain point in the game. Now, with game time lasting longer, you can reach your level 16 spike consistently. Level 16 Mundo is very similar to a level 16 Kassadin. And so for me, with those reasons combined, and with the ease of execution, split push potential, team fight opportunity, he's a solid A tier pick.
Perfect. Yep, I love that. The only reason he's not S tier is the blind pick ability, but also, like you said, you're not losing lane. Where below Emerald, there's so much, free gold and free solo kills for you to collect, but on Mundo, you're not going to be able to do that. So that's why, yeah, I'm happy with A tier.
Fiora.
Fiora, similar to Camille, but the ease of execution is way harder. So either D or C tier. I'll put a C for now, just because I don't think you have to execute perfectly on her in lower brackets. You're going to scale, you're going to get your items. if you're behind, you're one of the most useless champs in the whole game. But as long as you're even or slightly ahead, you are going to scale eventually. And in lower brackets, I'd say below Emerald 4 specifically, it's very easy to eat tier 2 towers. Because their tempo's so bad, they'll just randomly group up mid and just give it to you. So you can easily get that 3-4 item spike where Fiora is unbeatable. So even though her micro is really hard, I feel like your overall game plan is very easy. And you just scale way too well.
Yeah. Me personally, I'm going to put it in B tier.
Okay.
And the reason for that is because there's two ways to play. You can go for the Conqueror, more aggressive playstyle. But I firmly believe if you play Grasp and also perhaps additional with Biscuits and you go Hydra Rush, the micro intensity is lowered and their ease of execution is increased. And then again, one of the biggest things that I always talk about is your split push potential compared to game length. And like you said, if you get to those 3-4 items on Fiora, you are near unbeatable to any other champion. And that is why I still see students have quite some success just, getting their Revenant's Hydra, start proxy farming, stacking up a lot of resources and taking over the game like that. So I think B tier would be safe for me with the split push win condition later on in the game.
Yep, I like that. The Conqueror or even Conqueror Ignite playstyle is so much harder. Just going Grasp and just playing like a range champion with just queuing and then getting Rev Hydra is pretty straightforward. So I like that placement. Do
you want to consider Galio top laner? Because I've been seeing him a lot more in top lane in general. But that's mainly high elo, right?
Yeah, I'd put him in win recommend. It's just like a AP top counter pick, and when are you gonna verse Rumble, Blind, and Silver? Like never. So
exactly, and he's playable in some melee top lane matchups too. And generally speaking, you want to pair Galio with like an AD jungler, right? If you have like I don't know, like a Nefiri,
Vi or
like
something,
or Vi, Viego, anything that you can follow up or be the main initiator for. The champion is perfect for that. But then again, we're going to a more like holistic approach to the game where you're talking about team comps and like matching damage pools. So I think just for lower elo, you wouldn't recommend this champion.
Yeah.
Gangplank, to me, actually goes to the wouldn't recommend as well.
Yeah.
And I will explain why. So, first things first, I want to say that I thought Gangplank was one of the worst top laners objectively until I played in Korea, and there was I think 2 challenger top lane Gangplank one-tricks, and I was very impressed playing against them, and they made Gangplank feel very strong. He has gotten some buffs recently, which also helped him feel a little bit stronger, but I would actually say that Gangplank is arguably the hardest champion in terms of stepping stone to pick up as a top laner, because you're kind of like a melee bruiser, but you have no mobility, and it is just very hard to learn to play your matchups and balance in the game overall. Gangplank has a lot of strengths. He's the highest gold income champion in the game. He can 1v9 the team fight later on by a good barrel combo, but even after me playing Gangplank for arguably 400-500 games, I cannot reliably hit barrel combos myself. It's very hard. And so, the ease of execution and just the stepping stone on playing this champion, I think, is so high that I honestly wouldn't recommend him. To play him.
No, definitely. The formula for winning games on Gangplank is so complicated compared to our champions at A tier like Cho'Gath or Darius, right? It's just so much more straightforward. And like you said, even 500 games is probably not going to be enough for us or any student out there. So I would say, 100% wouldn't recommend.
And again, right, the emphasis, if you are a Gangplank enjoyer and you love playing the champion, by all means do it. I would be a Gangplank one-trick though. Like, if you're just going to say, I'm going to casually play a game of Gangplank, good luck. I would say you lose 9 out of 10 times.
Yeah.
All right, Garen. That's a tricky one.
Yeah, S or A. Put him high A for now. I feel like the ease of execution... put him back in S tier, actually. I think the ease of execution is just way too good on this champion. Even though you did get nerfed a few times, you still scale extremely well. Your matchups aren't that difficult, especially below Emerald. And just being able to win games through side consistently and just power farm every jungle camp, every wave, tier 2 towers, it's just too consistent of a strategy to win in lower brackets. So definitely, and the main weakness being early game, you're probably not going to get punished that hard. So I still, even after the nerfs, I feel like this champion's still, the king of below Emerald.
Also, the Toplane Academy, this is the champion that's by far played the most, the champion we have the most votes on, right? And the thing is with Garen is that you have so many fallback patterns in the game. Your kit is very simplistic to utilize, and you have a lot, like you can make mistakes and don't get punished as hard because you have infinite sustain through your passive. You don't have to worry about mana management, right? And your health management is limited due to the opportunities of having your passive. So I just think this champion can kind of do everything besides having a weak early game, and so it's just the perfect top layer to ease yourself into learning to play the game. Yeah, you can learn a lot of the concepts like split pushing, like proxy farming, playing around presets. So yeah, I would recommend this champion to literally every single top laner that is below Emerald.
Definitely.
Or even Emerald. Gnar.
Oh, I'll let you place him. This is a tricky one.
So for me, I'll put him in C tier, and I have never been a big fan of Gnar in a solo queue environment. And the way that I always describe Gnar as a champion is that he's a jack of all trades, master of none. He's okay in laning phase because he's a ranged champion and he can be oppressive, but it's not Aurora level of oppressive, and you can have some good engage, but it's conditional. It's a good disengage, again, it's conditional. You can split push and you can team fight, but it's all, you know, he can do a little bit of everything, but again, nothing he does too well. So yeah, I think this champion also actually requires quite some game investment to get the spacing down a little bit. However, I have seen a lot of more students also really make this champion work, so I think C tier is just a pretty fair placement to put him in. That's all.
Yeah, I'm close to putting him B because winning games through side is quite realistic on Nahm. It's quite oppressive to play against in side lane if he's ahead. He can just hit the tower in front of people, proc demolish, and swap mega last second. But the ease of execution is just way too brutal, I'd say. You have to play extremely well in lane because you're quite weak 1 to 5, and then when you base and get tier 2 boots, you're just OP in lane, and being able to execute, like get to 1200 gold without getting chunked or dying is quite difficult in a lot of matchups because one spacing mistake you can get destroyed. So I think the ease of execution is just not there for him to be above C.
No, I totally agree. For me, my thoughts on the next champion Gragas is very similar actually to what we described on Gnar, where your early laning phase as Gragas is very limited. Actually, I would put him in D tier myself towards lower MMR. And it's very similar that as Gragas, you're going to be losing priority in most of your matchups. And then if you play the full AP playstyle, you'll have... So I guess there's two ways to play Gragas. You can play tank Gragas or you can play AP Gragas. If you play the AP Gragas version, you can actually do everything as Gragas. In terms that you can, at a certain point, harvest everything on the map. You can push out sideways very fast, farm your own camps. If you go for the Lich Bane option, you actually push turrets very fast, and you can still team fight. However, the ease of execution is extremely high in the regards that your early laning phase is very weak, especially if you go for the mana crystal item start and try to farm like that to your lost chapter. And then every single ability is a skill shot. So I would say this champion is very tricky to try and make use consistently, but I don't think he's in the wouldn't recommend in my mind.
Yeah, he's definitely playable because you can win all your matchups, but it's similar to Gnar and the ease of execution, but the reason he's lower than Gnar in my opinion is you can't really win through side on Gragas, where you can do that on Nahm. Like, yeah, with Lich Bane you can hit the tower, but it's not quite the same as the champs above him, I'd say. So yeah, D's a really good placement. Yeah, Gwen? Oh, short days. Yeah, I think Gwen's difficulty is really overhyped in my opinion. I think this champion is like a good ceiling. I think it's not that hard. I think players below Emerald can definitely get consistently good at her. Like, yes, you can place your W, in really high level places if you get really good at her. I'm not saying there's no ceiling, but I definitely think it's kind of overhyped, the difficulty of this champ. And the scaling, the winning through side, I think it's just so good. Another one of the best scaling tops in the game. You see the trend for our S tier champs, but it's just true. 3 items level 16, you're just unbeatable. And I feel like getting there is pretty consistent in those brackets.
Right, I would always compare kind of Gwen with Fiora because both have percentage of true damage in their kit. One of the few champions in the games that have that. But if we were to compare Gwen's trade patterns and Illuminus compared to like Fiora, it's way less mechanically intensive. And one of the biggest barriers to Gwen is spacing, very similar to Camille. But again, I would say that Gwen is easier than Camille, so she's a safe S tier. The reference points on Gwen are very clear as well. In the matches where you need health, you have to go for Riftmaker, but everything else, if you go Nasus into full AP, like you start taking over the map at 2 items, and every item after that is even worse. And also, one of the biggest proofs that I have for Gwen working is that my actual brother, he was like, a lower Elo silver player, and he climbed all the way to Diamond 1, being a Gwen full one-trick. So yeah, I would say Gwen actually works, and I would always recommend it as the AP version next to a champion we'll get into later. I wouldn't recommend
just because we don't want to verse it. But
I mean, it's terrible to lane against, but it's so hard to win games on this champion because what do you do after laning phase?
Yeah, nothing. It's like you kind of win through side, but you can't really make any progress there. And I feel like at a certain point you are just easy to gank later on in the game. So this champ just doesn't really do anything, is the problem.
Yeah, it was funny. At the start of this week, I think his name was... I think it was Joel Star, but I might be butchering that. But if you're watching, you know exactly who you are. You're a legend. Because this guy was... I think it was like... He made a certain top lane champion like persistently, and then our first session, it was only a Heimerdinger vault. Heimerdinger wasn't even in the top lane academy yet as a champion, and yeah, it kind of surprised me too, because I'm like, damn, I haven't really played Heimerdinger. We had a pretty, successful coaching session, but it's interesting to see. There are some Heimerdinger players, ultimately, if you enjoy this champion, by all means play it. There are some Challenger Heimerdinger players. There's one in EU, some Alzheimer player, and then there's one in Korea that plays with Exhaust Teleport only. So there are people that make Heimerdinger work all the way up to Challenger, but yeah, it's tricky, and you gotta be a one trick, nothing else.
One thing I don't like about recommending it is there's no transferable skills at all to any other champ. I feel like you just won't learn anything except for Heimerdinger related stuff.
Yep, and there's like a lot of unique interactions too with Heimerdinger, because what you have, right, is, for example, after you've pushed in a wave but you're weak side, so you want a wave to push back to you, but you have turret standing, right? It's gonna be like, wait, how do I deal with the scenarios now where my wave's just automatically pushing away from me? So you need to get a lot of knowledge also playing Heimerdinger to make him work consistently.
Illaoi, I'll put in C tier. I feel like this champ, it's kind of similar to Heimerdinger. You just don't really do anything. Like, yes, you can try win game through side, but I feel like unless you get fed from lane, you're not going to be able to make progress inside 1v1. There's a lot of champs, and quite a lot of champs actually do outscale you inside. Like, they're not going to sit in your tentacles and fight you and win, but they can outscale you. Like champs like Gwen, stuff like that, they can beat you if they play it well. And I feel like if you're not ahead, you can't really 1v2 that reliably. Jungle champs are just too OP these days, so I don't really see why I'd put her higher than C.
Yeah, I think the lower elo you go, all the way to Iron, the champion increases in value, but the higher you go, and with every tier, I would say she goes down a tier as well. And that's just because once you start understanding how Illaoi works, this champion has a lot less options, honestly, to abuse you in lane. And I think Illaoi is one of the few champions where I would say she actually needs some help, because all the way since the terrain changes, I think that were introduced in season 14, right, she's been struggling in that regard. And she got some nerfs too, so yeah, I think this champion is kind of tricky to execute properly right now, and I think CT is a very fair placement for that.
Yep, she also doesn't really have a good build at the moment as well. It's like everyone's cooking, but there's nothing really sold since I removed Sandra.
Irelia.
Oof, I'll let you take this one.
The thing is with Irelia, I'm going to put her C tier, and the reason as to why I put her C tier, so I'm going to talk about the positives first, is that she is a pretty lane dominant champion, that she has very clear reference points in terms of, right, Roger Blade King, you are nearly unbeatable to almost anything in a 1v1, but there are a lot of downsides to playing Irelia. And so I might actually put your D tier thinking about it, because Irelia is very similar to Gangplank, where you need a lot of champion knowledge to make this champion work in a lot of the matchups that you're going to face, especially some of these champions like Sett, like Darius, like Garen, like Gwen. So actually, with that in mind, I'm going to put it in D tier. And yeah, the ease of execution is just not there. It's pretty tricky to win lane as Irelia, because you need all of matchup knowledge, and you are a highly mechanically intensive champion. But the second thing paired with that is that it's actually not that easy to progress on side lane, because you are a champion without mobility, unless you have access to a minion wave, which means that you usually have to dash to your opponents, not away from them. And so, with those things in mind, I would put it in D tier.
Yep, one thing as well I want to touch on is, I think out of all top lane champs in the game, she's the hardest to team fight on. I can't really think of one that's harder than her. So even if you get ahead in lane, there is going to be a point in the game where you probably have to team fight. And I think that execution's definitely the hardest by far, even for high ranked players. So yeah, I'm happy with D tier for sure.
Really good addition to that. She is extremely hard. Yeah, I agree. I don't think there's a champion that's harder to team fight with, because it's so tricky.
Yeah. All right, I'll take the Jax. So I'll put him in A tier. I think he's what you're looking for a champion, especially in those brackets. The reason I'm not putting him S tier is his matchup spread is so difficult. Where on a champ like Garen or a champ like Sett, you can follow patterns that'll work reliably in most of your matchups. On Jax, you have a bunch of different patterns that you need to know for certain matchups or certain situations. So his matchup spread is just so in depth. There's so much depth to it. I feel like that's really unintuitive for a below emerald player to learn. Like, it'll take a lot of time. But again, if you get a hit on this champ, you're going to win through side. You're good at team fighting as well. He's definitely what you want in a champion in those games, because you're good at everything. And your lane phase is pretty strong as well. You get pro into most things. So definitely a great champion. Just the ease of execution. You're going to lose lane a lot when you're learning Jax. It's going to take a long time. So for that reason, I'll put him A tier, but up on the upper end.
I agree. Two things that I would touch on Jax is that, as you said, he is like, I would say almost the perfect top laner in the regards that he is able to get priority in a lot of matchups. He scales well into the game. He's a good teamfight champion. He is a good split push champion. You have access to so many different build varieties too, right? You always have access to the Blade of the King option, but you can... Jayce is, I think, the only champion in the game that can build Frozen Heart, Death Stance, or Zhonya's, right? So you get access to so many different items. And the one thing that I think is important that actually is tricky to learn as a Jayce as well is that you have to worry about both mana and health when playing Jayce. And that is the thing that is pretty tricky that I found when I was learning how to play Jayce, is that you have pretty high mana cost, and with Biscuits not giving mana anymore, that hurt Jayce a lot. And he's gotten quite a few nerfs now, so I think A tier is just a very fair placement. If he had more options to mana, I think it'd be instantly to S tier.
Yep, perfect.
Oh, Jayce.
Ooh, that's a tough
Jayce
one.
Jayce is a champion where old Jayce I would instantly put him with a recommend, because of the same reasons that we touched upon with Gangplank. However, right now, I'm going to put him in C tier. And that is if you play Grass Jayce and Grass Jayce exclusively. You should not really try and play Conqueror or Face Rush Jayce if you're playing Jayce as just the baseline. And then the biggest thing about Jayce is that this champion is honestly the best blind pick that I could think of right now in the game. He can beat range champions, he can beat melee champions, he can beat tanks with Grass reliably. And Jayce is, of course, a champion that is very susceptible to getting ganked. But when you go for the Grass setup, the ease of execution on Jayce, in my opinion, is just, it's so much easier because you're actually kind of like a pseudo tank almost. If I were to play, say, Riven into Jayce in the past, it was pretty easy to find kill wins with the Jayce because he would reset and get a pickaxe. Now he comes back with ruby crystals, and so his damage is still extremely high, but he still kills me too. So you have a lot less worries, I guess, when playing Jayce now, and you can progress the game through the laning phase. You can progress the game through side lane. Teamfight execution is, pretty fine to me as well. So even though he's such a hard champion to pick up, with his ease of execution or like his skill floor loading because of grasp and item options that you have now, I think he can be in C tier. What do you think?
No, perfectly said. Right now, Jayce's grasp and overgrowth and the double ruby on first recall, it's just so much easier than it was before. So even if you make a spacing mistake versus like a Jax or Camille, something like that, you're probably going to win the trade anyway and still be fine. Where last season it was like one bad trade, your lane's over and you're just going to be under tower all game or just die straight away. But now it's just so much easier. The problem is to get the most out of this champion, the ceiling's still extremely high. Like the difference between a Jayce player that's playing it because it's meta and like a really good Jayce player is really huge. And below Emerald, he's okay inside, but you still can't compare it to, Fiora, Jax, Camille, those types of champs where winning a game through side's not that reliable. So I think C tier or high D tier is pretty fair.
I'll keep bottom C tier then. In line with these two. Kayle.
All right, and not just because I made the TLA Kayle guide, but we'll put her in A tier because
yeah, I think it's fair.
I think you shouldn't blind pick her though. I still firmly believe that, but I think this champ's really easy to have in your pool as a counter pick. If you just see an easy matchup, like some mobile champ like Sid or Mundo, Cho'Gath, something like that, you just get to scale for free. The champ's so OP, and the way you win a game, the formula for winning is very, very simple on her. So it's as long as you work on your spacing and you prioritize a consistent early game, you're not playing Kayle to dominate your lane. You just want to get to level 11 and your Nashes with tier 2 boots without being behind. You're going to just destroy everything and you just power farm everything on the map. It's very easy to win a game on her if you're not behind. And if you're in a matchup that's good for you, it's pretty hard to get behind if you're playing in that way, in that more reserved style. So I really like the ease of execution and carry potential on this champ.
Absolutely agree with everything you said. I want to make one footnote though. What I usually see with Kayle players is that I think Kayle is just an amazing champion. Below Masters and above Masters, it becomes way harder to play because people will punish you more in lane and games tend to last shorter too. Don't fall into the habit of only playing to not lose. You still want to assert some aggression when playing Kayle as well. Sometimes when I coach some Kayle players, I feel like they're too passive. And that is of course a thing that you want to keep in the back of your mind as well. That you need, you can still be aggressive when playing Kayle too. So that's just a quick footnote.
Yep. I like the mindset. You flip the switch, level 6 Swifty boots, you TP back to lane, and then you just run circles around anyone.
Exactly. Kennen, for me, I would put him in Wound Recommend. And that is because, very similar to everything we said about Aurora, how hard he actually is to execute. A good Kennen compared to like an okay Kennen is very noticeable, honestly, at level 1. I think when executing Kennen properly, you need a lot of knowledge about the game as well. And one mistake, you're kind of useless for the remainder of the game. It's hard to have high CS income. Split push potential is pretty limited. You're an insanely good teamfight champion, but then again, you gotta be in a good spot to, consistently win a teamfight on Kennen as well. I think the execution is so hard, and so I would just put him in with a recommend.
I like that you touched on that. Kennen, a lot of people think like, oh, he's just good at team fighting on paper, but you have to be a hit from lane. A Kennen that's behind the ulti is not going to do that much, to be honest. You have to get a lead from lane, and the execution is just really difficult. Kled.
Okay.
All right. If you're a one trick, I'll put him B or C tier. I'll let you be the tiebreaker. B tier is fine. I think you have to be a one trick though. This champ doesn't really have a great build at the moment. I think there's going to be a patch where he gets a build that he likes and he'll become OP. But for now, it's just like nothing that's that good. But if you're a one trick on this champ, not many people know how to play up against it. So you can definitely make it work. The reason I don't really like him that much as a recommendation is because he struggles into a lot of popular top lane champs. Like even the champs above him right now, Fiora, Jax, Camille, are all really difficult. So I feel like unless you just have way more champ mastery than them, which you should if you're one tricking Kled, you're going to have a pretty tough time in a lot of different matchups.
Yeah, I mean, you were spot on with everything you said. I think Kled was actually really good for a while. I had him very high in my tier list until Profane Hydra got hit pretty heavily. I think if you play Kled, you should still go for the Profane Hydra full lethality setup, because with that setup, you are going to have a lot of aggressive opportunities to play Flash Ignite, Profane Hydra, go full lethality like Voltaic Cycle Sword, and maybe, I don't know, more damage in general, because with that, you actually destroy T2 turrets, you can still side lane, and you're kind of like an assassin that is just like, you're always a pressure point on the map. Whereas if you go Bruiser Kled, you're pretty much outskilled after 2 items to nearly everything. But I think the biggest benefit that you'll have when being a Kled player is that this champion simply is not played too much. And you are one trick, and you know your limits and your matchups well. You're gonna surprise so many players. I've even coached master players that did not know that Kled cannot manually control his W, and so that alone already shows how much, or how little, I guess, people know about Kled as a champion in general. Definitely. So yeah, the experience is so important on this champion. I would also be a one trick if you play Kled.
K'Sante. All right, all you.
I'm gonna put this champion honestly and would recommend. I know there's quite some K'Sante players also in the Toplane Academy. But the problem that I have with K'Sante as a champion, and historically he's always had a very low win rate, regardless of what, pre-rework or pre-nerfed K'Sante we've had, he's historically had a low win rate in low MMR, and that has also been one of the reasons why it's been hard to balance. This champion, even though he's a tank, I hate saying it, but he's actually a skill champion. You need quite some spacing, you need good combos, and you don't win the game as K'Sante through like split pushing, for example. So if you get a solo kill as Garen or Gwen, or if you get a solo kill as K'Sante, it's not that effective because, with K'Sante, you're not going to look to progress the game through side lane or win through that. You can either kind of only win the game through team fighting and facilitating your team, which of course is the big downside of being a tank player. And with those things in mind, paired with how hard he's actually to execute and hard it is to carry games, I just wouldn't recommend this champion below Emerald.
No, definitely. A good way to look at K'Sante is he's just this kind of unbeatable brick wall in lane, but that's not what you want for a champion. You want to be the one, running them over, not just holding it down in top lane and hoping your team is better. And like you said, the execution's just not there. It's way too difficult to play it at a high level.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Malphite. All right, let's get him an A tier. Counter pick only. Yeah. So the thing about Malphite is you can still go the AP build with Malignant. I think people sleep on it. You'd have to be in a good matchup though, where it makes sense and a good team comp for it. But even the tank build, if you get ahead, if you're in a good matchup, and if you even if you're not ahead, if you verse 3 AD champions or 2 mobile ones like Aphelios, stuff like that, you're always going to be extremely impactful. And I'd say it's one of the easiest execution in the entire game. You know what your plan is at all time. You group up when you have ulti. When it's down, just go farm and come back on your next ulti. It's pretty straightforward. And whether you're ahead or behind, I think your impact in the game is going to be very consistent as long as you pick them in the right spots.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I think even if you're 0-10 on Malphite, you can still be one of the most useful champions in the game, which is just funny by default. Yeah, he's honestly like a set tier counter pick into the right drafts. And I think even in the very low elos, what I've noticed is that people like Malphite is like top 5 win rate very often in like say silver, and that's because he's actually really tricky to approach after first recon landing phase as well. He's an insanely good stat checker against all of these AD champions. So yeah, Malphite is definitely up there in terms of the tier list. For me, Maokai goes straight into wouldn't recommend or like a low D tier, and that is because yes, he is very easy to play and he has some well, to be fair, I mean, we can give some love to Maokai too in the sense that, he has a lot of utility too. I just don't think he has the same stat check potential or kill pressure that like a Maokai does, for example. And he's kind of, he's very similar in that sense to me too, like a K'Sante. Everything we touched upon there is in line with the Maokai, and that's why I would recommend him.
Definitely. I think even though he's a lot easier than K'Sante, it's still pretty similar. You're very team reliant, just not worth it in those lower brackets.
Oh, absolutely agree. Mordekaiser.
I'll put him in S tier. Yeah, straight to S tier. I think this champion, it just gives you everything that you want in the lower brackets. You're actually quite strong in lane. A lot of people play Mord as more of a poke champ, but his all-in is insane. As long as you abuse Mord passive and get these extended trades, you can solo kill the majority of champs. Even if you play up against a Darius, if you run Ignite, you can just straight stat check him if he tries to, ghost you down level 1. And this champion, I think a lot of people just get caught off guard of the kill windows of it. So definitely a good champion for lane. And in side lane as well, you don't really win the game through side on Mord, but if they're out of position, it's a free kill. And you can just group up and be one of the best champs in the game, 1 to 2 items. So definitely the ease of execution's there as well.
I absolutely agree with everything you said. And I think it's very important that you learn to play Ignite Mordekaiser too for those kill windows in trickier matchups. Because then Mordekaiser becomes such a tricky champion to deal with. I remember one of the best counter picks to Mordekaiser in the past was Olaf. And I remember I was a level 2 Olaf, and I'm like, I'm gonna kill this guy. And I just straight up died because the Mordekaiser had Ignite. He can stat check a lot of champions, and his ease of execution is there. You have sustain, you have stat check potential, awesome champion, one of the best SC champions.
Definitely.
Consistently. Nasus. So Nasus, I think I'm gonna put him in B tier. And the reason I put him in B tier is because he has sustain, he has scaling, he has split push potential. But I think there's a big misconception on Nasus that he's like a late game monster. He's actually a mid game monster, not a late game monster. One of the best parts about Nasus is that his kit is very simplistic, right? You're trying to sustain and get Q stacks. But one of the hardest things about playing Nasus and making him use consistently is how hard some of his matchups are. In the lower MMR, you're not going to get punished as hard when playing this matchup, so I think you can get away with a lot of stuff. You get 1 or 2 frame resets in, and then you're going to be a beast. But it is still relatively hard to single-handedly carry a game on Nasus. You only have single target damage, no AoE, and your kit is still limited in the very late game state. So I think B tier is like a pretty solid position to put him in.
Yeah, I like B tier. I feel like if you can't make progress 1v1 in side lane, and since your lane is weak, that's not going to be realistic, it's hard to close out a game on him because your team fighting is not that good. You don't really have that much threat. You have that one single target ability, but unless you're ahead, you're not just going to run somebody down 5v5. So I feel like B tier is pretty fair. Oh, Olaf. All right. So I'll check. I'll put Olaf into A tier. I feel like the ease of execution's there. He does have a ceiling to him, but he's still got that ease of execution. He's extremely strong in lane. And if you go the Drain Tank build, the Rev Hydra Sundered Sky, and you can go Visage third as well, you're legit a raid boss. You can 1v5 a lot of games. And if you pick Olaf in the right spots, I think he's pretty much unbeatable. Like if they have a low DPS, high crowd control comp, like Vex mid, Varus Nautilus bottom, something like that, you're just going to be completely OP. So, and he has a lot of build variety as well. You can go Stride Breaker into range comps, Rev Hydra, Drain Tank. So you have quite a lot of options there. So definitely, you're going to have to get used to his mana management, but you can take Prince of Mind and sort of cheese it a little bit. And once you have Tiamat, that kind of goes out the window anyway. So I'd definitely keep him in A tier.
This is one of the few champions where I wish I had the time investment on that he's in my champion pool, because he is so good in a lot of drops where my other champions simply are not good. In a lot of drops where they have so much crowd control, like also like the Rel, Rakan type champions, Olaf just wins the game because you just can't run him down and he just ignores everything, runs to your backline and kills it. So I think Olaf is really good, and I also saw that he actually has very high win rates in a lot of the Elo brackets right now, also lower MMR. So I'm even hesitant to put him in S tier, but I think A tier or high A tier is very consistent.
I'm happy with S tier. Let's give him a promotion. He's earned it.
Yeah, I think he's actually very strong right now.
Yeah.
Ornn is a very interesting one. So Ornn is one of the few tanks that I actually also recommend, and I'm gonna put him, it's either high B or A tier, but I'm gonna put him in A tier for now, because, and this is one of the champions that actually surprises me the most, but Ornn always does pretty well towards low MMRs, and that's because this champion just provides so much value into those games where you have longer game states, because just Ornn upgrades by itself provides so much gold control in the game. But he's one of the few tanks that is also really hard to try and progress into. He is very good stat check heavy, has pretty decent scaling. Again, the problem you have as a tank is you can't really progress the game to split pushing or anything like this. So honestly, I'm really on the fence. To be fair, A might be too high, maybe B I think B tier is fair, but what surprises me always when I look at Ornn is that his win rate is so high, and I can't really place as to why.
I'd keep him C or B tier for the main reason you touched upon. We can't win the game through side on him, and so you're pretty team reliant. Even though you do give gold later on, I still think this is a very team reliant champion. I do like that he's pretty strong in lane, but it's kind of similar to Cassandra in a way, where you get a solo kill, it's like, it's nice, but it's not really going to change the game that much. So I would put it, I'm happy with low B, but I'd probably put him C, just because if you're recommending, let's say, a silver or a gold player, right? You probably wouldn't want to see them playing Ornn if you wanted them to race to diamond or something like that, right? Ornn would just take a lot longer. There'd be a lot of games that are out of your control on this champ, even if you play well, where if you played that exact same skill level on like Jax or Dr. Mundo, you'd probably win a lot of these extra games.
I absolutely agree. I think maybe it's a reach, but I think so many Ornn players probably also follow macro, so they just all have good rune and like item setups, so they probably do like above average on that champion because the entire Ornn player base just watches macro. High key could be a cook, but I think that could be a reason too. I think it's worth mentioning, but Nidalee top. Now I'm gonna put him straight into wouldn't recommend. But this is definitely a champion that we're gonna have to talk about in the high elo tier list. Nidalee top, same as Kennen, same as Aurora. It's like how hard this champion is to execute is just really up there. But I mean, this is on par with Aurora of how oppressive this champion is to lane against. It is just horrific. And she's worth mentioning now because she's being played a lot. In Korea, she's one of the champions I saw the most towards the end of my climb. And well, I think laning against a Korean Nidalee top has to be one of the worst forms of modern day torture known to mankind. Right? You just like you get punished by 5 games of playing against the Nidalee range top. It's the worst. So yeah, I hate playing against it, but more thoughts on Nidalee later. Yeah,
we'll come back to on the Halo list.
Yeah, what do you think of Pantheon?
Pantheon, probably C or B tier. I'll go B tier, just because really strong in lane and pretty good ease of execution. But closing out a game on Pantheon is really hard, I would say.
Yeah.
Like being really impactful with your ultis without doing any inting ones. And even if you have good ultis in the early game, the mid game, when it comes 22, 23 minutes, it still feels really hard to actually cleanly close games on them.
I think everything you said is very clear, so that's why I want to put him C tier too, because just the order of execution is so high, and you are reliant on snowballing. If you are a Pantheon that's even or behind, you are useless. So that's why I would put him on C tier, because even though he has so many advantages, you gotta make sure to use them, and that is why I would put him in C tier in my mind.
Perfect.
Poppy. Poppy's an interesting one. I would put Poppy personally in B tier, and even though, again, similar reason that we always give with tanks, right? You are not a sole win condition as a tank. It's hard to win games as a tank. Poppy is actually one of those tanks where I would say she's almost like a melee bruiser in lane, where you have a lot of ways to solo kill people. I like the build variety too, where you can go Sundered Sky, which again is also not really a tank item, right? So you're kind of more like a somewhat juggernaut bruiser tank type champion, but you do well against a lot of these melee top laners. You do well, like you're arguably one of the best tank destroyers as Poppy, and so because you have so many good matchups, the champion is relatively simplistic to play in terms of laning phase. You have clear reference point, and our winner usually tends to do good as well. And one good W or ult can, swing a lot of skirmishes. I think this B tier is somewhat fair.
B or C, yeah. The reason I'd lean towards C is even with Sundered Sky, I still think the carry potential is not that high. You don't win games through side. But I actually think the laning difficulty is pretty underrated, just because the champ's frustrating to play against. But I think to play it at a high level, it's pretty much a range champ. If you're spacing well with Q and Buckler and stuff like that, it can be quite tricky to really get the most out of her and for the lower elo brackets. So I'd say maybe a high C tier.
Okay, that's a fair statement too, yeah. And again, always, right? And you see that pattern with Chippy's and me's reasoning is that tanks are so hard to make use of in terms of like your potential of winning a game. We don't want you guys to be the mentality that you like want to be carried, right? We want you guys to play champions that can have as many win conditions as possible, either winning lane, winning through side lane, winning through split pushing. It's kind of the same thing, winning through team fights. And that is why we put tanks, generally speaking, lower, because they're just harder to win the games with, especially in a solo queue environment.
Definitely. Quinn? All right, Quinn. I'll put Quinn in C tier. The reason I'm doing C when I'd put most range champs lower, I think she's probably the easiest range top in the game to play. You legit have a point-click disengage button, and as long as you're playing around that cooldown, you can't really get punished by 90% of melee champions. I do think winning the game can be tricky, but she's got pretty good side lane, and you push inside. If you can make progress, you do that. If you can't, you just make a gank with your ult team. So I think she's probably the easiest range top in the game, and she just counters pretty much it. In lower elo brackets, you're going to set Darius, Garen every game, Mordekaiser, and you can beat most of them. Mord will be more difficult, as you're going to have to bait spell, stuff like that, but I'd say most champions you play against will be fine. So I'd probably keep her a high seed tier.
Yeah, I like that. I agree with your statements too, that she's like relatively easy to pick up. Just make sure when you pick Queen, guys, ban Malphite.
Yeah.
Ban Malphite. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of problems.
Definitely.
Renekton, this one is very interesting to me because, again, my initial thought would be to put him on B tier. I think if you are a Renekton one trick and you learn his matchups well and you're able to play with Jack of all trades and potentially with Ignite in the matches where you're comfortable with too, this champion can go up to A tier to me. I would say that Renekton is actually, his stepping stone is pretty simplistic, right? But the ways to win games on Renekton are pretty limited because you're scoped to kind of win lane and dominate lane and make as much happen as possible in like your laning phase to mid-game transition. You really got to put a big staple on the map in the mid-game. And if you don't, you're going to get outskilled by most people in side lane. And then later on, this champion just feels very underwhelming to play. Now, there are multiple playstyle opportunities where you can go kind of like the normal bruiser setup where you'd go for like Eclipse into like, let's say, Cleaver, Descent type items. Now you also have the more Assassin type build where you go like Blade of the King, potentially even Yumos, these type of build setups. So I think if you are a Renekton one trick and you learn to play with Jack of all trades and potentially with Ignite too, I think this champion, again, can go up a tier. But the baseline Renekton, with the amount of win conditions that you have and how much dominance you have to put out in the mid game, I would put him in B tier with those reasons.
Yeah, I like B tier for the main reason of he spikes extremely out 1 to 2 items. That's when you're the best champ in the game. After that, you're going to get outscaled by pretty much any mid 80 carry and a lot of top champs as well. But for a lower elo player, it's just not intuitive to push the pace of the game. Like ping your jungler off Gromp to come dragon and get there early with your sweeper and force all these early fights. I find that really difficult for lower elo players who are mainly focusing on, jungle tracking or more basic fundamentals. So I think that's quite a tricky skill set for them to learn. But like you said, the champ's really strong in lane. You can snowball through that. And if you get 5 plates in tower, you can carry on any champ. And Renekton's pretty good at that type of style. So I'm happy with B tier.
I love the way you put that too with like, talking about directing your team. It's just things you don't think about when you're learning the game still yourself or when you're just still trying to get, a better footing into the game. And even then, right, let's say you did have that skill set. The odds of people listening to you in those games are also going to be, diminished when you're playing in lower and more. So I think everything you touched upon there is just really spot on. One of the favorite top lane champions I like to talk about, Rengar. So Rengar is one of the few junglers that I would actually say are good for top lane. I'm going to put him in B tier. And that is because I would say is very similar to, say, like a Kled or like a Renekton. You can go for the Bruce variation with Revenant's Hydra, or you can go for the Lethality variation where you're more of an assassin. But similar to Kled, Rengar top, you should be a one-trick when you play Rengar top. Like, he's a niche top lane champion. But if you learn to trade well on this champion, you are one of the most oppressive laning champions to play against from the early game to the mid game. If you drop your guard once against a Rengar top lane champion, you'll just get completely snowballed on. This is one of the best snowball champions in the game. And his early laning phase is extremely oppressive to play against. You're going to be on your toes from the get-go. And if you are one trick and your opponent doesn't really know his trade patterns well or his all-in windows, Rengar really, really shines there. And I would say that, your biggest benefit when being a Rengar top player is that people don't know how to play against it.
Definitely. So I'm happy with B tier, but like you said, you have to be a one trick. Every single Rengar top player I versed, and I felt, okay, this guy's different. If I check his OPGG and his past seasons, he's probably got 5,000-6,000 games on the champ. Like, you have to be a Rengar player for life. But if you really love playing the champ, it's really, really oppressive in lane. And I feel like the lane phase is really difficult, but after lane, it's quite easy. You just push in, and with the Rev Hydra build, just push in someone and look for a play with your ult team. It's pretty straightforward how to win a game on him and what you want to do in the game. Just the lane phase requires a lot of input. But if you're only playing Rengar, watching Rengar VODs, you can definitely make it work.
Even now when I play Rengar top and I do a trade sometimes, I'm like, why is this guy still full HP after I just chunked him? Like, I'm like, what is even going on? So even I still don't really, I understand his W cooldowns and how to play against it, but sometimes, okay, this guy has infinite Ws as well. I'm just like, okay, this champion is broke. But again, you gotta be a Rengar one trick to utilize that.
Riven. Okay. I'll give it to you. Give it to you.
Yeah. Okay, so Riven historically has been on the bottom of the bottom in lower MMR tier list. I'm gonna put it on C tier now. I think she's very similar to Irelia, where... Okay, so let's talk about the downsides of playing Riven. Riven is very hard to learn because she is a very mechanically intensive champion in terms of, say, combos, right? But I think you can narrow that down to 3 main combos. So you have your Q delay, your fast combo, and your double cast combos. And if you focus on just those, it'll be good enough. But the second part to that, which is really tricky, is that similar to Jax, every matchup is kind of going to play different in terms of your trade patterns. So the order of or in which you use your abilities has to be different in every matchup. For example, playing Riven against like a Sett or a Darius, you are never allowed to use your E in a trade to either initiate it or during. You use it to just pretty much get out always. You can, and if you use your E, it instantly means you're extending the fight into an all-in. Whereas if you're playing against, say, like a Garen or like Warwick, you have to initiate every single trade with your E, otherwise they will chunk you with their Qs. So with Riven, you need to gather so much champion mastery and matchup knowledge, which is the biggest, I would say, like gate to learning how to play Riven. So your stepping stone is very high, and it is also paired with the fact that you're playing a champion without sustain, and yeah, you kind of have to learn to get ahead as Riven to be useful. Now, with all those negatives out of the way, the other hand, Riven is one of the most overloaded kits in the game. She has one of the 3 best item spikes in the game as well. Once you had Eclipse, Sunsky, Death Sense, there's almost no champion in the game that can beat you. One of the biggest benefits that shines with Riven compared to other top lane champions is that you are one of the best 1v9 champions in the game because you also have AoE damage. A champion like Camille or Fiora, for example, cannot kill 3 people at once. Riven can. And so you have to take the benefits with the downsides. She is a very high skill ceiling champion, and I think some people will love it, some people will hate it, but you're going to need to spend a lot of games to make Riven work properly. But she's actually gotten a pretty good win rate since Jack of all trades has been introduced. So those are my thoughts on Riven.
Perfect. Not gonna argue, mate.
Yeah. Okay.
The words out of my mouth.
Rumble. What do you think of Rumble?
Rumble, I'll put him in wouldn't recommend, I'd say. Yeah. I think this champ, similar to Renekton, where you have to be the bus driver, pinging everything, getting really involved in the game. But the lane phase is way harder to milk everything out of it. And unlike Renekton level 6, ungankable. It'll just 1v2. But Rumble is just a free kill to any jungler, so I feel like it's just way too hard. And even if you do get good at Rumble, you can't win through side lane. You're pretty team reliant, I would say, because you have to just perma group on this champ. So definitely not a champ you want in pre-Emerald.
Yeah, and then also a big part that I always have about Rumble is that you get outskilled after 2 items by nearly everything as well, unless you're like an item ahead of the curve, which is really hard to get towards. So yeah, it's really hard to make a champion work reliably. Sett. In my mind, Sett go straight to S tier or high A tier, but honestly S tier. And actually, I look at these champions too. No, I think S tier is a safe position to put him in. In the very, very low brackets, say like Iron, Bronze, Silver, Sett is easily S tier. The higher you go, it's going to be a little bit harder. And that is because one of the biggest benefits to have a Sett is his set check potential, both in terms of his kit, but also his healing through his passive, right? Kind of similar to the Garen passive in that regard. You don't have to worry about mana management. And I would say he's the more aggressive version of Garen in laning phase. And he's a little bit weaker in, say, the mid to late game in terms of the amount of skirmishes that you can approach. But I think just how good his laning phase is, split push potential, team fight potential, he's a very good all-around top laner. And yeah, to me, it's either S tier or high A tier. What do you think?
I want to put him in A tier just because I feel like on this champ, you do have your Sett passive, but if you're behind on Sett, I feel like you're going to be a shit stain the whole game. And you just don't have the same scaling as, you know, if you look at every other champ in A and S tier, you don't really have that same level of carry potential later on in the game. You're pretty much forced to get fed. Now, he's probably stronger in lane than most of the champions, you know, above him. But I feel like if you don't get ahead, you're not going to be as useful. So if you're from even and behind, it's just such a much of a weaker champ, I would say. So that's why I wouldn't want to put him in S tier.
Yeah, makes sense. I completely agree. This might be an interesting one, but I want to put Shen straight into S tier. And I think this champion is extremely strong right now. So ultimately, Shen is a tank that historically has always been team reliant, and that is why I wouldn't really recommend him. However, right now, Shen has gotten multiple buffs in a row. His Q damage has been increased, and also your Q on hit damage procs on turrets now. Another change that Shen benefits a lot from is that there's only 1 grubs clear now, so if you get those 3 grubs early, you're gonna have turret damage for the remainder of the game, and Titanic Hydra is really good on him again now. So if you play with either Flush Ignite or Flush TP, both can work, and you go Titanic Hydra, you can actually keep CS per minute very high, you have a lot of dual potential, you can actually hit turrets now, so it is worthwhile to stick to a side lane and actually push a turret now, paired with the fact that you're still having so much global presence by just being on the map, having your ult. Your scaling on Shen is actually pretty decent right now, and you always have, such good team fighting, especially if you're something they can initiate, like a Hecarim, Vi, these type of champions. So with all those reasons combined, I think Shen is actually S tier right now.
I do think he's gone up a lot from the buffs. One thing I want to disagree with you on, I don't think he scales that well into team fights, actually. Like, yeah, if you've got the dream comp with your Vi jungle going in, but it's just not that reliable. I feel like most of the time in solo queue, you're going to have like a Graves or something. It really depends. You can't really, but if you play Shen with, you know, that dream comp, I'll put him in S tier. But I feel like he just doesn't have the same carry potential as like Gwen or Garen or Darius still, even though he's a bit stronger. I'm happy to keep him lower S tier or high A because he has been buffed a lot and he's deceptively powerful in lane. For a lower ranked player, I feel like closing out a game on Shen could be a lot more difficult than like Olaf or Gwen or, you know, Cho'Gath, something like that. So I feel like
that's definitely true, yeah.
That could be a big problem for them.
Closing out the game is significantly harder with them. And I did think one thing we didn't touch upon is actually, well, Shen baseline, he's pretty easy to execute as well, but like a good Shen player, you'll feel the difference instantly too. But yeah, I mean, he is very strong right now, objectively.
Definitely.
Singed.
I'll put him wouldn't recommend. One thing I hate about this champ is he has 0 transferable skills. So unless you're going to be a Singed player for life, it's kind of a time waste, I would say. But if you love Singed, I'd say if you only want to play Singed your whole life, then probably C tier would be fine. But I just wouldn't want to recommend him to anyone because of that reason, the transferable skills, and you don't win games through side lane, you're not that strong in lane, you pretty much have to proxy and avoid lane, but that can be impactful. You can attack jungle, you can attack mid, but that's quite a hard skill set to learn really well below Emerald. A lot of time they're just going to feed while proxying. I think that's probably, you'd agree, one of the more common questions we get for below Emerald students. It's like, how do I know when I proxy? Do I have to see the jungler? Yeah. So really learning that skill is quite difficult. So if you play Singed, you have to master that, and again, no transferable skills, so I wouldn't want to actually recommend this champ.
I actually agree with everything you said. I would have taken a different approach, but you've changed my mind too. So historically, I actually, Singed always has a pretty good win rate towards lower MMR. And I remember when I was fresh in top lane 2 and learning League, Singed was one of the champions that I feared the most and I hated the most. But it's just like, you have to play against a champion a few times, and then you understand also that sometimes it just means don't interact, farm up, and you outskill this champion so ridiculously fast and hard too. And I think the biggest aspect with not having any transferable skills would also put him for me in a wouldn't recommend, unless you're going to be a Singed player for life, exactly like you cited. Yeah, there's also this one guy in my YouTube comments that just keeps telling me to do, you know, Singed fundamentals, and then I'm like, brother, there are no Singed fundamentals. You just play Singed and that's it. But yeah, no, I agree. Sion is a very interesting tank to me. It could be just me, but I feel like recently when I lane against Sion, this champion is just absolutely unkillable regardless of what I play with. But at the end of the day, he is a tank. He is very similar to the other tanks that we've mentioned. I'm going to put him in D tier, and the reason as to why is because he is actually pretty tricky to play. He is like, you wouldn't recommend it, but you wouldn't really expect it. I think a lot of players, all of this champion kind of comes down to spacing, either with your W shoot, your Q positioning, right, and ultimately your ult as well. So everything about this champion is pretty tricky to pick up. He can be very lane dominant, and he has some push potential, right? But you're a tank at the end of the day. If you get a solo kill, it's not that impressive, and you rely on your team to carry. With everything we say, and with how hard he is to play, I put him in D tier.
Perfect, yeah, I like D tier. I like that you touched on that point, the spacing on Sion. People don't really think about that, but the good Sion players, they're kind of always running around the edge of you where you can't auto them back. They're still getting damage onto you, and that's a really hard skill to learn. TK, I'll go wouldn't recommend, I think.
Yeah.
I think it's similar to Sion, but even less transferable skills and less side lane power. At least Sion, you can break towers, and even if you die on Sion split pushing, it's actually good if you get the tier 2, that's fine. On Tahm, you can't really, I think winning the game on this champ is hard. The formula for winning doesn't really do anything. Like, you're not that good in a team fight, you're not that good side laning, unless you get 3 solo kills from lane from eating people. I feel like it's just more of a cheese pick, but I wouldn't recommend it for someone to play if they wanted to climb.
Absolutely, and the thing is as well, there's 2 top laners in the game from the melee class that don't have wave clear. One of them is Shen, one of them is Tahm Kench. Shen can still get access to wave clear and, facilitate his team well. Tahm Kench, you're just a walking pile of dung in most points of the game after laning phase, and that is why I also wouldn't recommend it. I've had so many games where I get solo killed by a Tahm Kench once, but let's say I'm 20 CS up after the laning phase ends. 5 minutes later, I'm randomly up 80 CS, and that's just because he walks mid, maybe gets a kill, but I get a tier 2 turret, and then I just take over the game. So I honestly also wouldn't recommend to play Tahm Kench. Alright, Timo, we are at Timo. This champion is interesting. So out of the range class, I'm gonna put him in B tier. What is interesting to me about Timo is that he's actually, I think, top 10 most played top laners as well. I will always know that, so many of the people that we coach, they hate playing against Timo. he's one of the best champions to pick into melee bruisers. And if we take a look at the S tier champions, they're all melee bruisers, and the only champion that has a dash is Gwen. But even Gwen hard struggles against Teemo, right? He's really good into, you know, these melee bruiser champions, which are almost all the champions that we've listed into the S and A tier. However, the tricky part about playing Teemo is that playing a range champ objectively is harder than playing a melee champion. You gotta worry a lot more about spacing, no sustain, and you make one mistake and you're going to be able to get run over for the remainder of the game. So I think he has a lot of strengths and to be able to be very lane dominant, to be honestly one of the most annoying champions to lane against. But the order of execution and the way to win the game is pretty intricate, and so maybe that's why you could consider C tier, but I think he is a little bit of an edge over some of the other range champions we talked about. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like what you touched on. The closing out a game is way more difficult than, let's say, Kennen or Aurora. It's very straightforward what you're going to do after lane on those champs. But with Teemo, you don't really provide much out of lane, but the lane is so much easier to play for Teemo than, you know, to pilot Teemo than Aurora Kennen. And every champion you verse below Emerald, you're probably going to have a good matchup into them. So definitely an overall good blind pick to play, but closing out games is so difficult. Maybe we could put him C tier.
Yeah, I think C tier is fair too. Right, a lot of the things you're just trying to get shrooms around neutral objectives and hope they walk into it. That's one of the most satisfying things to do, but yeah, that is also kind of like your win condition. Trundle, very interesting one.
Trundle,
I'll let you take it away.
I'll put Trundle in B or A tier. Let's go low A tier for now. I feel like one of the easiest champs in the entire game. Definitely the easiest split pusher. And the reason I'll put him A, he has a lot of unplayable matchups in the game objectively, but below Emerald, you're going to verse Mordekaiser, Darius, Garen, like matchups that are fine for you, and you can just straight stack check them. It's a lot easier for you to outplay, if you can call it outplay, to outplay them in lane than, than it is for them. And a lot of top lane champs, a hard skill for people to learn is when to group and when to split push, right? A lot of people really struggle with that. They will split push when they should be, you know, grouping up, and they'll miss major fights, or the reverse. They group up and lose tier 2s. But Trundle, you never have to worry about that because you just right click down bottom or top and you just bash the tower down. So I feel, and this champ's also, even if you get behind, it does the same job. 5005 does the same thing. So I feel like just it's a very easy way to win games.
I agree with everything you said. I've been a 0-5 Trundle before with just my Revenant's Hydra, Trinity Force, and Hullbreaker, and I ended the game in about 25 seconds, which is just ridiculous, right? You have a very linear game plan, and also with Revenant's Hydra, I think it takes away a lot of the intricate stuff about, say, wave management, stuff like this, because you're just pushing, trying to get the turret, and that is really your entire game plan. It's a fun playstyle to play, in my opinion. And also, important to note, Trundle is the strongest level 1 champion because your Q is similar to a Darius passive. You take 10 AD away from them and you gain 20 AD. So keep it in the back of your mind, right? When you're playing against them or playing it yourself, Trundle is the strongest level 1 champion. Absolute disgusting champion to play against in the early game.
Definitely.
Okay, Tryndamere. I would put Tryndamere into A tier actually. And that is because he has a very similar playstyle pattern to Trundle. However, you have a dash. So I'll talk about the benefits of Tryndamere first. So I would say you're actually the fastest champion around the map in terms of farming, jungle camps, and side waves. You never have to worry about mana or health. And the playstyle preference that you should play when playing Tryndamere is going for Revenant's Hydra or Profane Hydra. Either way, you're going to Hydra first. So there's 2 ways to play him. You can go for the easier setup, which is Grasp. And then you just go for Revenant's Hydra, and you're looking to be an absolute menace in the early game. And then you just go Revenant's Hydra, you get 10 cents per minute, relatively easy, honestly, by just pushing Cytos and drone camps, and then you try to split push for the remainder of the game. Or you go for the bit more intricate playstyle, which is Halo Blade Tryndamere, and there you go Profane Hydra, and you spike very hard at 1 item, then you fall back a little bit in mid game, but 3-4 items, you one-shot literally everything on the map, and you can still play for the split push playstyle. Either way, both are really good, and I've coached some Tryndamere players too in the academy, and what I've noticed is that this is also one of the best champions, kind of similar to what I talked about, say, with like Darius or Set, where they're the more aggressive version of, say, a Garen champion, right? Because you have no mana sustain, you have infinite health sustain. One of the biggest things you have to learn when playing Tryndamere is learn to play for equal health trades, because your champion has such an outdated kit that you can't really do like intricate trades. You just E onto them, trade all the attacks, and then you heal back up. But that is a skill set that you have to learn on itself. And then, I think he's a great champion to learn the game with. I think he's amazing as a one-trick champion to learn your all-in windows. And you have 2 different playstyle preferences. So for those reasons, I'll put him in A tier.
No, perfect. You had all the points I wanted to touch on.
Urgot.
I'll put Urgot in A tier, I feel. I think He just doesn't have the same win through side carry potential as a lot of the other champs above him, and he is a lot harder to play, I'd say, than most. I'm not going to call him a melee champ, but you know, those melee bruiser type champs. You're still a range champ, you have to make use of that spacing, and you're actually a free kill to most jungle ganks. You need to play around that quite well. Where a champ like Darius or a champ like Jax, like Darius has more 1v2 potential, Jax you can just hop out. I feel like on Urgot, a lot of people will fall victim to just being free kills, or they'll fail the spacing, get pulled in by Set, pulled in by Darius, and just get run down. So I think you have to pilot this champ quite well, but if you're good at it, if you're good at laning on it, the way you win games is quite straightforward. Your team fighting is very easy. You just front to back. Winning through side is a realistic option too. So I think this champ's a bit underrated.
Actually, my initial thought would be to put him in S tier. So I agree with most of the points you said, but I still think that Urgot, and what I've noticed too, is even against a lot of the champions that we have on higher end too, like he can outskill so many champions on side lane past level 13 with how much health his passive is going to deal and his set potential. What I do agree with though is that if we look at these champions, when compared to Urgot, that Urgot is a little bit harder to execute because he's a ranged champion, and you really need to learn how to assert your dominance in level 1 to level 3. Then you kind of have to farm to level 9, and then you can start taking over the game. So because you have a bit more reference points to work towards, I will put him at the highest A tier, just barely below S tier, because this champion has so many ways to win the game. Now, one of the biggest things that I value so much about Urgot is that, generally speaking, there's a lot more team fighting now after past, say, minute 20, right? You're gonna have Dragon fights, you're gonna have Atakan fights, you have Baron fights, and Urgot is one of the strongest champions at around 2 to 3 item spikes, while still having the scaling opportunity that Ranked misses, for example. And so one good Urgot ultimate can completely swing a mid-game team fight. So I think he just has, you can kind of have a lot of playstyle preferences with Urgot. He can do a lot. So I think he's just a very good all-round top laner.
Perfect. One thing I forgot to mention as well is he's a bit resource hungry. Like, I'd probably say Urgot, out of all the champs I've watched from our students, they go very quickly, just chucking out Qs for little bits of poke, and you've probably seen it as well. They run out of mana very easily, so that's a hard skill to learn, like the mana management side of him, where I feel like on champs like Gwen and Darius, it's not that big of a problem. You're not going to Darius Q for no reason, for example, where on Urgot, it feels like, oh, I'm doing damage, I'm doing good, but you go after 3 Qs and now you're useless. So I feel like that's a hard skill to learn too, and you have no HP sustain as well.
True, you can be very trigger happy, so that's a really good point to make as well. So every Urgot player should be cautious of that. We could briefly mention Udyr now. So similar to Rengar, Udyr is another champion that I used to talk about. I kind of dropped him, but I've seen the researches of like this assassin Udyr top lane. I don't know if you've seen heard people talk about it. I still think that like Udyr and Rengar are the only top lane champions that I would recommend. However, I'm going to put Udyr into D tier, and I'll explain my thoughts. So whenever Udyr became meta, also in pro play, there were like 2 to 3 patches where this champion was good. It was actually the lowest rated top laner, and that's because this champion is surprisingly hard to pick up, because you need to understand your order of abilities very well, you need to know your all-in windows very well, and you're only going to be a good Udyr top lane player if you are a one-trick. However, I would say that, if you make the lethality Udyr setup work, you'll be able to make it, you'll be able to do it well, but again, you have to be one trick. You need to know your all-in windows so well, you make a few mistakes, you're kind of just useless. So that's how I would see Udyr.
No, definitely. I feel like he also has the same problem as Renekton, where you're the best champ in the game for 1 to 2 items and then completely useless, and speeding up the game is going to be a hard skill to learn.
So I think D tier is just a safe place to put him in.
For sure.
Then we have the two,
Vayne
top lane champions.
Just slap them in.
Varus.
Don't recommend, Vayne Varus. No transferable skills, like really difficult to play as well to a good level. And even if you do well in your lane, I think closing out a game on these champs is very difficult. It's hard to, you're not really that good in side lane unless you're extremely fit from lane. On like Varus, you just one-shot anything. And team fighting is really hard on them too. So I think it's just not a champ I'd want anyone to play, in lower brackets especially.
Absolutely agree with everything you stated. And if you make one mistake, you're kind of going to be useless. You have some scaling up potential, of course, and you're like extremely annoying to play against, but you'll probably be perceived different by society as well when you play these top lane champions, and that is also why I wouldn't recommend these champions.
Definitely.
Vladimir, interesting one. I'm hesitant to put C or D tier. I'm gonna put him in D tier, and the main reason as to why is because what I see a lot with Vladimir players is that this champion can actually be very obnoxious and strong to play against in the early game, but people need to really know their limits when playing this champion well. They need to know their setups, and the order of execution or the ease of execution is actually pretty high in my opinion on Vladimir, because you need to know your windows very well. You make one mistake and playing Vladimir from behind feels so bad because you have no damage. You always have have the window where you can take over a late game teamfight and single-handedly carry it with like a level 16 ultimate and getting a massive AoE. But you have to get there in the first place. And if you make one mistake against some of these stat check bruisers, they will run you down for the remainder of the game. You gotta really know your limits well, and so that's why I don't think I wouldn't put him in wouldn't recommend, because he's a little bit easier to play than say the Aurora or the Kennen, because you have sustain and you have some stat check potential through that. But still, winning a game on Vladimir, pretty tricky.
Definitely, yeah. The fact that he's got no mana and infinite health sustain makes him pretty easy in lane. But like you said, one misstep and just get ran down by Darius and you're out of the game. And even if you do okay in lane, because you don't take TP, and you're not a fast champion like Tryndamere or Garen who just boost around the map, it can be quite hard to be involved in all the fights you want to, and not just getting stuck inside.
Yeah, absolutely agree. So I think it's just safe to put him there. Volibear.
Volley.
Okay, Volibear's an interesting one.
Oh,
I'll let you take this one.
I want to put Volley in A tier. I think I've been sleeping on the bear too long. I think this champ has some builds that have a lot of 1v9 potential, and he's just a stature king. Like, so easy to play in, and if you get one good trade onto anyone, you can pretty much just dive them from the remainder of their HP bar, and even just full HP dive with a gank, stuff like that. I feel like the ease of execution's there. The hard part of him, I'd say, is team fighting. It's really difficult. He just sucks in a team fight, but if you play mainly through side lane, and you build a build, you go an item build that is really good in side lane in that game. Really depends what you're playing up against, but especially if you can get quick blades in them, or even the Cosmic Drive build in certain games, I feel like this champ, it's just sleeper, really strong inside. You can make a lot of progress there.
I think one of the things that you touch upon, which I value the most in this champion, is his build variety. And I actually played some Volibear myself to try and get a better feeling of him. And one of the biggest things that you really just have to learn is utilize your E well in the first 2 to 3 levels. And you can get priority into nearly every matchup so long as you play properly with your E placement and the E cooldown. When I coached Volibear players, some of the traps that they fall into is they just want to look for kill pressure too much. And they look through the lens of, I want to kill people with Volibear. The other thing you can do with Volibear is you just take Demolish and you just push in the wave super fast. You take a plate, you proxy the next wave, you rinse and repeat. And so I had a Volibear student that played the same matchup twice. He played against Maokai, basically the same matchup twice. The first time, he got ahead with an early game kill, and then he kept trying to kill him, and he slowly fell behind, had to take a better reset, and fell behind through that. The other game, he just played for more a resource-intensive playstyle, and he ended up having 4 plates and 2 kills with a 60 CS lead after the laning phase. And so, when you play this champion more so as like the lens of, I can just farm waves, proxy, he's one of the fast proxy champions in the game, and you know, he can destroy enemy jungle at that point too. If you play it like that, this champion becomes a whole different beast.
Definitely.
Warwick. Okay, I'm gonna put him in S tier. So, I'll put it off like this, I'll start off with this. I am the worst Warwick player known to mankind. I don't know how to make this champion work. There's 2 playstyles to play him with. The EU playstyle is to go Stridebreaker Rush with WMAX. The Korean playstyle is to go Flash Barrier and go QMAX with Blazer and King. And honestly, I would say that the hardest part about learning Warwick is to actually still keep thinking about the game and not only looking for kill pressure, taking small victories. That's what I have to keep telling myself when playing Warwick. But man, is this champion just so disgusting to lane against. He has infinite sustain. You need to learn to take a few equal health traits and then you just outvalue everything. Mana management is actually a big thing on this champion, but other than that, you just have an insanely good laning phase. Your mid game is actually surprisingly good, and your mid to late game team fighting is ridiculously strong, which is a thing I didn't notice too much. One of the big downsides when playing Warwick though, is that you only have single target damage, you have no AoE, and you do need some setup. It's hard to be a first engage on Warwick, but if you play this champion well, you should be able to get even or ahead out of laning phase nearly every single time because how oppressive you are. You keep 1v1 potential if you play with the Blazer and King setup, and yeah, he's just so obnoxious to play against.
No, definitely. I'd call him the strongest melee laning champ in the whole game. I feel like there's no melee that can really match him if he plays well. He does play, he is pretty useless from behind, and some comps can be really hard to fight into. But I'd say on average, if let's say we're coaching a silver or a gold player and they got really good Warwick mastery, I feel like they'll just run over anyone that they verse, and the way you just can win through side if you get ahead is quite consistent as well.
Yeah, I think he's a solid S tier pick.
Wukong's hard to place. I'd say he's a really good counter pick, but such a bad blind. I'll put him B tier. I think it's just average. I think winning the game on him is quite straightforward. You just push inside and look for a team fight, right? Around your ulti timer. But the lane, there's a pretty tough matchup spread. Like, so pretty much any tank you verse is going to be difficult, or any AP champion. But you do quite well into a lot of AD champs. And especially if you take Ignite, you have a lot of kill windows. The thing is, the champ that he does quite well into, like Gnar and like Aatrox and stuff like that, you're not going to verse them that much. You're mainly going to verse stat checking champs, so you're going to have to play a bit better than them. And if you run into like a Mordekaiser or a Warwick or something like that, you're not going to be that useful. So I'd recommend only using him as a counter pick, but because he's quite easy to play him, he can definitely work in a champ pool.
Yep, I think how I always see Wukong, he's just like a weaker version of Jax. You have the same problems where you have to worry about both health and mana management. And yes, in some matches you're gonna have better stat check potential, but objectively, I would just always say that, you know, Jax is just a stronger version of Wukong top. That is why me personally, I always kind of strayed away from him. But in some of these other matchups, right, he can be extremely oppressive as well due to his passive against double 80 topsides too, where they have like an 80 top laner and an 80 jungler. So there's positions where I would say like, wow, Wukong is really strong here, but it's rare.
Definitely.
I mean, I'll start off with Yasuo. I'm going to put this champion in wouldn't recommend. Similar to Gangplank, he's one of the hardest champions to learn to play in top lane. Your matchup spread is like really hard to get used to. You get countered by so many champions in the game, and you know, maybe Yasuo mid 0-10 you get a spike, 0-10 Yasuo top lane, you get eaten even harder.
Yep.
I would say there's very few games where I would say this champion is cute. Now Irelia and Yasuo are both very hard to play, but on Irelia, once you're Blade Runner King, you can actually just take over nearly every matchup, right? You're actually strong. Yasuo, it's still very tricky, and Yasuo struggles with the same thing, that he only has mobility on side lane in a minion wave, but then you're not like a champion that has some, you know, 1v1 potential or dual potential as strong as Irelia does. Another problem that Yasuo faces is that his teamfight execution is extremely conditional and very hard, so...
Definitely nah. There's no reason I'd say someone should try to add that to your pool, unless you've already played it before. In mid lane or something like that. Yone, I'll say C tier because the ease of execution's missing. Maybe B tier. I see you're hovering B tier. We'll slap him in there. Don't worry.
Yeah.
But I feel like the thing I like about Yone, that's also the hardest thing for below emerald players to pick up on, is you're really good at short trading and long trading. You're really good at both, but knowing when to do each one is quite a hard skill for them to learn. And team fighting is very, very hard on him to team fight well, because you're just going to get mind controlled to ulti in every time, but you need to be very patient on him. And even though you're good in side lane as more of a farm vacuum, you don't really have the same tower threat as a champ like Gwen does. I like to see Yone as more of the AD version of Gwen in terms of your mid-game identity. But Gwen has a bit more side lane options, I would say, and her teamfight execution's a lot easier. So Yone is just kind of the harder version of her, but I feel like he has more options in lane than Gwen does if you have that mastery built on him.
I have nothing to add. Like you said, everything that I would have wanted to say. His
Perfect.
laning phase is where you will feel so strong. When I was playing Yone, I was like, damn, the champion is surprisingly easy to play in lane even. But once you get to that mid game, late game, you will need so much mastery and go through reference points and learning experiences to get better at him, because similar to Yasuo, you're very conditional. You just need some experience to learn to play this champion better in mid to late game team fights. So, I mean, you said everything perfectly.
Definitely.
I want to put the champion straight into S tier.
All right.
And that is because this champion right now, honestly, he's even beating Riven pre-6. Which is ridiculous. When you play Yorick now, you can lose prior level 1 to level 2, but after level 3, you chuck 2 points in Q, and you're able to stat check nearly everything. You have an insane amount of ghouls, and then of course, the same thing that happened previously. Now, after level 6, there's nearly no top player that can stat check a Yorick, right? But I remember sometimes I coached a Pantheon student into Yorick, and I was like, well, you gotta make sure you kill the Yorick pre-6, because after 6, you know, it's gonna be hard to stat check against Yorick. Now, even a Pantheon doesn't have that option anymore to kill Yorick pre-6. So he's just like this lane dominant champion that you can't kill pre-6. You can't really kill him after 6, and then he skills relatively well. And so I see Yorick more now as like this neutralizer, but still very impressive split push champion. I think it's gotten easier to get solo kills on Yorick in lane as well. However, and I would say this is the biggest downside, Yorick has become boring to play. Like, you don't have that like dopamine anymore where you can go like lethality and kill people. You're just like this brick wall, almost like a Sunday type brick wall that just split pushes.
I'd say he's one of the only champs that we're probably going to have S tier in our low and our high low tier list as well. I think this champ just loads into the game with Divine Sundra. His Q is just so broken now. And like you said, even Riven, even Jax struggles into him now. I mean, Jax has a better time than Riven, but even the matchup used to be so free, and now it's extremely difficult. So I'd just say this champ's too good at the moment. It's just overpowered.
Honestly, I think overpowered is such a uncommon phrase to use in League of Legends, but even the champions that used to do well into him just have to respect him. And that's weird.
Yeah.
That's really weird. Oh, Zac. Zac's another one.
Put Zac in B tier, I'd say. I think he's slept on a bit. I feel like getting the most out of your lane phase is quite tricky, which is why I put him in B tier. The ease of execute, it's like easy to play, hard to master. but I feel like you can't just load into a game with 5 or 10 Zac games and win in lower brackets. You need to be quite good at him. I wouldn't say one-trick territory, but you definitely need some good mastery on him. But the way you win a game is pretty straightforward. I don't like that you don't have any side lane options, but just pushing inside, rocking up with a sweeper and looking for an Eon, the AD carry that dashes in the mid, is going to be a pretty good strategy for you. And the lane phase is deceptively broken, I would say. I think it's a really good laning champ, because I'd say most champs that have no mana and infinite HP sustain, like Tryndamere, like Vladimir, they're quite oppressive to verse if they are played well, and Zac's no different.
If I was in the Mundo and Jovier, out of the tank class, Zac or Cho'Gath would probably be the champions that I would try next. Playing against a good Zac player is horrific to play against, especially when they also play with Flash Ignite, right? When you play against these aggressive Zac players, he can play against tanks, he can play against ranged champions, and he can play against melee bruisers too. Yeah, the downside of Zac is that there's going to be a breakpoint where you get outskilled, but your early to mid game is so oppressive to lane against. And yeah, I mean, I've even been Mundo against a good Zac player, and I didn't have any breathing room, even though in my mind this matchup was super easy. So if you play against a good Zac, yeah, this champion is really hard to lane against.
Definitely.
And I think it solidifies pretty much the entire list. I think it's a good overview of all the champions. I'm very happy with the champions that we see in S tier, and I mean, the way you can kind of perceive the tier 2, of course, is that the champions in S tier are, generally speaking, going to be beating the champions in A tier, at least in terms of their win conditions in the map as well. And I'm pretty happy with our overview.
Yeah, definitely, it's looking good.
Alrighty, guys, so going over into the higher elo tier list here, ultimately, the priority kind of changes when you go into higher elo. This is going to be from Diamond and above, but we mostly also look through the lens of, let's say, Grandmaster Challenger. Of course, Diamond and Master is still applicable here too, but it's really hard to sometimes find the balance in that regard. Now, one of the biggest priorities that you want in higher elo is blind pick ability and how strong your champion is in like almost any lane scenario, right? So you got to be able to be way more versatile in your, I guess, variety of matchups that you could potentially get into. So Jayce and Ambessa and I guess Yorick are like the kings right now in top lane. You can blind pick these champions, and it's not like, oh, I'm gonna pick this into it and I'm gonna beat them. They're just strong into nearly everything. Worst case scenario, they can go even, and even if they go even, they still have the scaling, right? So that is why these champions are just king right now. We've put the tiers in chronological order too, from like S, A, and B tier. And yeah, I mean, some things you will notice is that some tanks definitely go up in priority. For example, Zac has gone up, Shen has gone up, Cassandra, of course, has gone up because he's an amazing blind pick champion. Some range champions gone up too. For example, like Aurora, you see go up. Kennen, of course, goes up a tier. Varus Vayne go up. Because ultimately, these champions are extremely oppressive to lane against, especially when in the in the right hands, where people understand the intricacy of the game and they can utilize the mechs of their kits. Yeah, I'm curious if you want to have any thoughts here too, Chippies.
No, definitely. And for us, blind pick ability is not just for lane as well. If you pick a champ like Jayce or an Ambessa, you're going to be good in every game. It doesn't matter what 5 champs you're up against the enemy team comp, you're still going to be extremely useful. Where a champion like Olaf or a champ like Gangplank will be really good into certain comps, but pretty bad into others, even if you're in a good matchup. So most of the champions in S tier and high A tier, they're going to be super impactful regardless of what you're playing up against, and the lane phase is going to be pretty stable for them as well.
Another thing you might notice is that every champion that plays through the lanes of split push only, with the exception of Yorick, is weak. So Nasus, Trundle, maybe champions like Illaoi, right? You'll never see them towards the higher MMR bracket, simply because it's just very hard to make the champions work. Actually, maybe one champion we could consider to put higher, because there's the 1-2 is maybe Singed. That's maybe the only champion that we could consider putting in like C tier, right? Because I don't think it's fair to put him in the winner recommend. He definitely has that spot, but again, you gotta be Singed player for life or don't play Singed.
Definitely.
Yeah, other than that, champions that just have very weak kills right now, say like Kled, Wukong, Aatrox, they just go tiers lower because they're pretty hard to really progress into. And then some of these more, picks that are, it can be good depending on the job. For example, like your Gragas or like your Galio, paired with like a melee AD jungler, they will go up in priority because they can really solidify a comp. And other than that, the way you should perceive it too is that the champions in S tier are just the strongest, and then they'll beat most of the champions in A tier, and then just kind of chronologically goes down in terms of how well they would do in nearly every team comp objectively. So I think that's those are my final thoughts on the tier list for now.
No, definitely, it's looking good.
Perfect. Alright guys, well, those are the for the tier list, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.
See ya.